I will be joined by Jonathan Ikeolumba, who is a financial expert and economist, as well as Dr. Aliyu Audu, who is also an economic analyst. And hopefully they do justice to this discourse. We will be back after the break, so do stay. And you are still watching Business Daily, coming to you live on Trust TV. And again, happy Independence Day to Nigeria and Nigerians, 64 years down the line. And today we celebrate, the largest or most populous Black nation on earth. And we are looking at Nigeria's, economic progress in the past 64 years. Like I said before the break, what a journey it has been, especially for Nigeria. But I'm joined now by my guest. I'm joined by Dr. Aliyu Audu, who is an economic analyst. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us today on Business Daily.
Thank you very much.
And I'm also joined, thank you very much.
Happy Independence.
Same to you, Doctor.
Thank you.
I'm also joined virtually by an economist and financial expert in the person of Jonathan Ikeolumba. Thank you for joining us on Business Daily today.
Yeah, good morning. And just confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
All right.
Thank you for joining us on the program. I will just want to start the conversation, by looking specifically at the president's speech from this morning. A lot was said, so much to unpack, from, talking about how, he had, over the past 1 year, we have seen, the Nigerian economy attract as much as $30 billion in, foreign direct investment, to the reforms that the president did say that the Nigerian economy is currently undergoing. So much was said. I must say, regarding the Nigerian economy. But I will want to start with you, Mr. Ikeolumba. What was your reaction, to the president's speech and how he addressed issues concerning the Nigerian economy?
Right. So I think that, I listened to the speech and I also watched it live when you read it this morning. So I think I can look at it from two perspectives. So in terms of the content of what it was shared, and then also in terms of aspirations, or what I would say, what are the takeaways for an average Nigerian. So from those two perspectives. So first of all, in terms of what was shared, I think it spoke to a couple of things. It spoke to the fact that the economy was quite diversified, shifting away from depending on oil. Also spoke about the infrastructural development and project that the government was doing. Spoke about fiscal reforms, monetary reforms around the debt service ratio coming down from 97% to about 60-something percent. Spoke about, the measures that were happening on the fiscal side. I think he also spoke about the investment in terms of how they wanted to attract foreign direct investments, particularly about 3 executive orders targeting the oil and gas sector. Also spoke about what I heard was also around the National Youth Confab or conference. That would hold for 30 days. So I think so those were the kind of things we heard that were quite broad in terms of speaking to various things, right? Also the program around technical talent development. There's a project going on by the Ministry of Digital and Information Communications Technology. So he spoke to quite some broad things. But then what is the takeaway in terms of what does an average Nigerian take away from that message? It would seem to me like nothing new really, that one can hold on, right? It was more like it will get better. This is what the government is trying to do. And because inflation is real, and I think that the average person, in terms of how that translates to him, for example, in the cost of his transportation or in the prices of the things that he buy, has there been anything that he's gotten away from me that he might say a real direct impact in the immediate terms, right? So I think that is also part of the issues, right? Nothing really do you take away that you could say could have been different from what an average Nigerian has heard maybe in the last couple of weeks and couple of months. months. So that's where the kind of dilemma that for me I see with the president's speech really. I think they were broadly really aspirational, but I don't think that really anyone left listening to it this morning would say, okay, would anything change tomorrow, next tomorrow? You know, so I feel it's still really quite aspirational and still broad, right? But not quite specifics in terms of what you could get away immediately. That's how I summarize what I heard today.
Well said, but let me go to you now, Mr. Audu. You have heard what Mr. Ikeolumba has said so far, and also, you know, the comments we did get from social media as to Nigerians, you know, talking about how they see the Nigerian economy. But let's hear from you. Has there been, you know, some missed opportunities that we maybe took for granted in the past that could have changed the trajectory of things, you know, 64 years down the line? Because when you look at, you know, the key economic index or metrics, the economy doesn't look so good, from inflation to unemployment to poverty numbers and all of this. But has there been opportunities that you would say that we may have missed, and that if we didn't miss, things would be different now?
Absolutely. Yes, from the president's speech, you can tell that the president means very well for Nigerians. And, you know, he has unfolded a team to make things, to put in the right economic policies to help Nigerians. But Nigerians are not concerned about the policies. What they are concerned is what they take home, is the price of commodities in the market, is the price of fuel, is the price of food, price of inflation. So no matter how much the president means very well for Nigerians, he has to have a very strong team, a team that is determined, a team that is qualified, a team that will take responsibility to make things better for Nigerians. And so far, I think maybe the president might have to look into his team in order to bring in the right policies, because, as you said, there are obviously very missed opportunities in the past. And that is why we're where we are. If you compare our country now to Saudi Arabia, for the last 5 years, the exchange rate between the dollar and the Saudi Riyal has been constant, meaning the difference is not much. But in Nigeria, it has changed over 2,000% or thereabout. We are one of the worst performing currencies. Now, I don't think that is the direction the president wants, but I think we have to have square pegs in square holes to get things moving. So perhaps it's time for him to look into his team, no matter how well he means for Nigerians, and I know he means very well for Nigerians. Thank you very much.
Well said there. Talking about the team, even though some may argue that there does exist an economic team at the moment, are you saying that the people there are not the right people for those positions?
Yeah, looking at the performance of the currency, which is the function of the Central Bank of Nigeria, look at the performance of Nigerian currency in the last 1 year. I'm not going to say it's anything to write home about. Let the truth must be said. You know, so if the people at the helms of affairs are not doing the right thing, then it's important we talk about it, so that the right people are put in the right place in order to adjust the economy. I mean, there's a lot of expectations in the Nigerian economy now, and there's a lot that can be done. So we need to have the right people in the right place for us to achieve these goals.
Well, I definitely agree that there is so much more to do, but I would like for us to speak regarding specific sectors, starting off with the agricultural sector. Some may say that at some point in Nigeria's history, there was the agricultural neglect, because you will recall that at some point Nigeria was, once a global leader in agricultural export, from cocoa to groundnut to palm oil and the likes. And there came, the dependence on oil as far back as 1956, after oil was first discovered in Bayelsa State. I believe it was Olobiri where oil was first discovered. So I will begin with you now, Jonathan Ikeolumba. How would you access, Nigeria's history from moving away from agro-commodities to focusing on oil, and, how many years down the line, that focus hasn't shifted so much. I mean, the president did talk about, diversifying the economy, but this is not the first time we're hearing, things like that. But let us just get your reaction regarding that.
All right. So, I mean, I was just reflecting today that we are 64 years old, and I sort of wanted to look at how far we've gone in terms of our economic prosperity and projection. So I'll start it this way. So if I take the first 6 years, because the Civil War happened in 1966. So if I take the first 6 years from 1960 to 1966, I think there was a strong focus on oil. We're a major exporter of oil during that period. But when we had the Civil War, that sort of halted a lot of our economic progress. And after that, he now began this thing of wanting to reconstruct things a bit and sort of liberalize. So that's when the whole work, after then, we started doing a whole lot of work. That would take us to the 1970s around liberalization of certain sectors, also our structural adjustment program that was going on. And then if I then move away from then, that was then when we now started having towards the mid 1980s now, the attempt to wanting to sort of diversify and move away now from oil, right? And that also then led us to the democratic dispensation that happened in 99, where again, we also saw some levels of growth. So I think the point is that not until the last, would I use the word, the last 9 to 10 years towards the latter end of the Jonathan administration, I think did it become very, it hit us on the head that, look, we clearly had to have a situation where oil shouldn't be playing a prominent role in being our major revenue earner. And that's when we started doing a lot of work, especially around raising tax revenues. I think started taking it very seriously, looking at agriculture. Also, recently will be what we are doing around exports in terms of our creative talents, and also leveraging digital. So I think that the reality, and data will speak to that, is that we've relied heavily on oil, but now because of global trends, whether it's from sustainability around fossil fuel or what is even happening with global supply chains around oil and gas as well, I think the reality has hit us right now that we need to start moving away from oil. So agriculture, which you spoke about not too long ago, it's actually one that has been touted as a strong potential, but its contribution to GDP isn't reflective of that potential that it does have. So, but I think if you look at the budget, which will just give us a good indication of what the government's primary sources of revenue will be coming from, what you will clearly see is quite a lot around trying to raise tax revenues, quite a lot trying to raise revenues from sectors like oil, the non-oil export sectors, especially looking at what we can do with creatives and technology, is also something that this present administration is trying to take very seriously. So we've not done it. I mean, we've not diversified in terms of ensuring that the contributions from these sectors is speaking a lot to our revenue generation. But I think it's now really mainstreaming the agenda. It's something that they're having at top of the agenda. So what I would say is that this administration is 1 year into what it's doing. So maybe over the next 2 years, we would then see if that ratio then moves up. But I know there's a deliberate plan to actually ensure that, non-oil drives revenue generation. And you can even see it with the work going on around raising tax revenues from non-oil sources.
I will want to hear from you also, Dr. Audu, regarding the non-oil sector also driving revenue. A lot has been done in the area of agriculture, in the past, I would say 2 years or 3 years. But I will want to hear from you, regarding that. Currently, food inflation is still skyrocketing. Last we checked at about over 40%. Concerns around food security still, are on the table at this point. So what policies would you recommend that we put in place, especially in the area of agriculture? Nigeria is blessed with vast land, and we haven't seeing enough being done in the area of agriculture. But let's hear from you now. What will your suggestions be?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, as I was saying, that we need to we have to have the right people in the right places. regardless of the intent of the president, which we all know he means very well for Nigerians. Now, talking about agriculture, we can't just sit down and say we are just trying our best to see what we can do in agriculture to, make agriculture better. Let's look at countries that have implemented agricultural policies. Let's look at Chile, for example. Let's look at Brazil. What are the policies these countries used? And how were they able to move from a non-performing agricultural sector to a very well-performing agricultural sector in terms of feeding their country and exporting? Chile and Brazil are good examples. Brazil even produces ethanol. Brazil has the same land mass like Nigeria and produces the same oil, but they produce more than we do. They use agriculture to produce ethanol and what have you. Now, what is our investment in agriculture? What are the current policies in agriculture? This is what we should look at. There's a policy in Brazil called the bullseye policy, that what you're supposed to do as a farmer is come with your farmland, the government comes with machinery, and you partner with the government and create what they call mechanized large-scale agricultural farming. Do we have such large-scale agricultural farming currently going on? So I believe that these are the policies we should look into. Different countries have come with different policies. We need to study these policies, how we can collaborate with farmers in order to produce. Look at Senegal. Senegal produces sugar. 48% of the sugar Senegal consumes, they produce. Now the figure is going up, and they even export sugar. Let's take a look at Nigeria, for example. We are producing less than 10% of the sugar we consume. Now, do we have enough agricultural land to produce sugar? Yes, we do. Who says this? African Development Bank says we have enough to produce and export. Now, why are we not doing this? They have, if you look at the National Sugar Council, there have been a lot of policies that have been introduced, but let the truth be told, the big monopolies are spoiling this, are not encouraging this policy. They are discouraging this policy, working with different government agencies to stifle these policies. And that's why these policies have not seen light of day. And today, we are still dependent on sugar being imported. Now, when you import any commodity, you are not only importing that commodity, you are providing jobs to that country that you are importing, and you are denying Nigerians of jobs. This is the crux of the matter. This is the foundation of the matter. We need to start investing in agriculture big time. Garbage in, garbage out. We cannot be talking about agriculture now. If you're moving from one sector to another sector, like you're moving from oil, then you have to divest from that sector, which is oil sector, or take the revenue from the oil sector and invest in the sector you want to talk about, like agriculture, for example. Look at the concept of Dubai. Dubai took their oil, the revenue from oil, and invested in tourism. That is why everybody is talking about Dubai today. It is not rocket science. This can be done. But are the policies on ground? Are we following the policies? Are the right policies being introduced? Let's talk it ourselves. If you don't put in the right policies, how are you going to bring about increase in production? Do we have policies now that we can partner with? Farmers are partnering with the federal government to bring in mechanized farming. Do we have tractors being exported into the country to partner with local farmers? We have a lot of agrarian land, and we are not doing large-scale farming. Now, if you must get somewhere, you must have a vision. Our vision is not to continue to manage, because Nigeria is blessed. Let's say the truth. We have a huge land. Our vision is not only to feed ourselves, but to export and generate revenue. That is where our vision is. And are those policies that we have in currently, are they targeting that vision? That is where I say we need to have the right people in the right places. We need to have determined people to move the country. It is not rocket science. Chile has done it. Russia has done it. India is doing it. BRICS economy is doing it. A lot of countries are doing it. Why can't we do it? Even Colombia is doing there are changes there right now. So why can't we do it? So we need to have the right people in the right place. We only have one country. We are import dependent. That's why every day you hear dollar is going out, dollar is going up. Let's tackle the matter from let's stop the reliance on dollar. Look at the textile industry, for example. All the Arabic textile is dead. All local textile manufacturers are dead. The Chinese have flooded the market with Chinese textiles. So local production is dead. How are you expecting to tackle strengthen the naira when you always fall back to demand dollars to go and to import goods that you use on daily basis? We need textiles, we import sugar, we import milk, so we need dollars. And this is why the demand for dollars keeps skyrocketing. Now, if we stop the importation by policies designed that, okay, you cannot import sugar, you cannot import milk, let's start what they call import substitution industrialization. Whatever we import, let's start investing in it. Even cars. Let's talk. We have local production of cars. We have the Innocent Motors. Why are the National Assembly members importing cars when we have Innocent Motors? What are you doing? You're taking the jobs of Nigerians and giving it to the Japanese. Encourage. People say, oh, Innocent doesn't have the capacity. Provide the capacity. Nigerians don't have jobs. Build, invest in Innocent Motors in different states and create the capacity, let them produce, create jobs, and let's support local production. And let's ban the importation of foreign cars. This is the way to move Nigeria forward.
Well said, especially, talking about job creation. And right about now, I will want for us to touch on, unemployment and youth engagement. According to research, the Nigerian people are the major asset that Nigeria has. Very vibrant, very tenacious, very resilient people. But I really want for us to touch on, the investment that has been put so far in the people. Currently, according to the NBS, unemployment stands at about 5.3%, even though some might argue that may not be, the right number. But I will want to begin with you, Jonathan Ikeolumba, looking at, the rising or the growing youth unemployment and growing unemployment as a whole, underemployment as well. People doing jobs that they are overly qualified for, or in positions that maybe their qualification, surpasses, but they just do these jobs to put food on their table. I will want for you to speak regarding, entrepreneurship amongst the Nigerian youth. Has there been enough focus or enough investment in the Nigerian youthful population?
All right, that's a very apt sort of important area that we should be having a discussion on. So if your direct question is, has there been enough? I think my answer would be no. But has there been some effort at improving entrepreneurship? Yes. But is it enough? Then I would say no. But I think the important conversation should be, so what can we do? More like offer solutions. I still think linked to this conversation on youth employment and entrepreneurship is really around skills and education. So one of the things that I would advocate for is, we've got to deepen our strategy as a country for creating jobs by also ensuring that we're improving quality education. So if we invest in education, and hopefully there are a lot of technologies that can do this for us or complement what we are currently doing, I think that's one way we can deal with it. I also want to speak a bit about technical vocational training. I think that we have sort of lost our attention on that, improving our technical and vocational training institutes. We need to revive some of these institutes back, because those institutes are designed by their nature to improve practical skills that will prepare people for employment, right? Whether it's self-employment or employment as well too. Then I also think we need to mainstream entrepreneurship education. That's why I said education is at the heart of this conversation. We need to mainstream mainstream entrepreneurship education across, different stratas of our education system. I even argue now that we should have entrepreneurship taught now even at secondary schools, right? Not everyone necessarily has to progress after secondary school, to get into other higher institutions. So if we can start mainstreaming entrepreneurship in secondary school, I think it will improve. Obviously, policies will help, right? There's quite a lot that the government is doing. There's the ease of doing business that I must say I'm aware of, and some of the business-friendly regulations, especially with turnaround time for business registration. But there can still be enough around access to finance, right? The government is doing something around educational loans, but we also have to have a lot of these around MSME loans. I know that there's a plan for several MSME interventions and fund scheme, but we need to democratize access to these things, especially to people across the rural axis within the country. And that might also look at tax breaks, and tax incentives for them. Fundamental to even driving entrepreneurship and also creating jobs is also infrastructure. The gentleman on the studio was speaking a lot around, we need to invest. But you see, there's some fundamental infrastructures, I think, right, in addition to the wonderful things he's saying, but we also have to go back to infrastructural investment, right? So think about how power is, right? There's a whole lot we're speaking to around energy transition, right? So we need to make sure that we have several alternative forms of power. And all these economies that he was mentioning, right, that doing quite well. One of the things consistent with all of them is that investment in power and alternative sources, of power. We also have to deal with transportation. It's such a critical infrastructure if we're going to drive entrepreneurship, right? Because you also need, product and services, right? And access to products and services through roads, through railways, through our port systems, through our airway systems. We need to do that. I also think that technology is also going to be critical to driving entrepreneurship and youth unemployment. I'm sure you know very much about the potentials of the digital economy. You would know that quite a lot of Nigerian youths, who have taken to content creation, who have taken to leveraging creative talents with technology, are now having access to a global audience to be able to earn money. And even there's quite a lot that the government is trying to do on how to tax a part of that revenue. So I also think that has to happen. And by extension, we need to start looking at things like innovation hubs, tech hubs, improving digital skills. And you won't believe as well that the conversation we're having on agriculture as well too has a role to play in youth employment, and also this conversation we are having around entrepreneurship. So agriculture, especially the other value chain parts, agricultural extension, right? So post-harvest losses is a big deal. How can we plug into that value chain and deal with that value chain? We must not also forget manufacturing. Right, we need to invest in industrial parks, local content policies as well, that ensures that manufacturers will patronize domestic industries as well too. I might just add that maybe mentorship is something that we need to design a way to also create mentorship for these youths as well too. But that's what I will share for now.
But I want to continue with you, Jonathan Ikeolumba. You have spoken, regarding the infrastructure deficit. You mentioned power specifically, and currently there exists the energy transition plan, which was brought into the picture about 2 years ago. How would you rate the follow-up regarding that plan? There's so much, especially in the area of alternative sources of power, and specifically conversion of e-mobility, in the area of driving, and so much has been done regarding that. Of course, we have seen efforts in the area of, car conversion to CNG, which has been taken very personally by the current administration. But let us hear from you now. How would you appraise the energy transition plan 2 years down the line?
All right, cool. I also want to add into this conversation the infrastructural plan, really. So beyond the energy, but I'm happy to speak to energy. So I think the first point is that we have a huge infrastructural deficit. And to be honest, right, any conversation we would have about things like even how that translates to stabilizing our FX, stabilizing the power of our currency, really has to go back to ensuring that we have the right infrastructure to power growth, to power revolution, to power industrialization. And critical to it is obviously power, right? So yes, we have an energy transition plan that would allow us look at alternative sources of power, especially looking at things like naturally renewable energy, whether it's from solar, whether it's from wind, whether it's from water. Also looking at the idea around moving to gas in itself as well too, right? And I'm happy with the investment we're seeing around CNG. I think that what it's showing is that we have the significant opportunity, and also because there's a whole agenda around SDGs, which is also speaking about the limitations currently with fossil fuel, right? So I think that what I would say on our energy transition plan is that this is the right time. There has been no better time for that energy transition plan to really mainstream what we are doing. We've made some progress, and we have a couple of opportunities to make a lot of progress. We can also improve the way we are actually powering a lot of the industries, right? And just ensuring that those industries can make significant investments in alternative power, also because of the carbon emission associated with our current practice as it is. But we also need to ensure that even for our existing power infrastructure, that we are able to increase the generation capacity. Again, that will also speak to having a mix from renewables and the conventional sources. We must also improve transmission and distribution, because if we're able to generate a lot more, it still doesn't add any value if it doesn't translate into how we're able to distribute these power sources and also transmit it, across the length and breadth of the country. I also want to advocate that private sector participation is also something, right? So some of this critical investment we need in infrastructure, even in our energy transition, cannot happen alone with public investment or the government's investment. We need to open it up to private sector participation, right? And that would also democratize the access. So if you look at our rural communities in the country, I think that there are alternative sources of power that can also be cost effective and would also be climate friendly that private sector investments can do. There's quite a couple of facilities I'm aware of, right, from the World Bank that is also driving some of these things. So I think we also need private sector participation. But I want to also add that from an infrastructure perspective, beyond power, we also need to look at transportation. I keep speaking about that, right? We must make sure, because that's really what speaks to how trade and commerce really can spread across the length and breadth of the country, right? We need to be able to expand our road network. The government, I listened to the president in his speech today, spoke about 80% completion on some of the bridges and roads they were doing. We would like to see that wrap up to 100%, right? We need to expand and improve our road network across critical economic hubs and zones across the entirety of the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Yes, we've done a lot on rail, but we can still do better on rail network as well. I think we need to deal with that as well too. Then also complementing that would be what we are doing around our port system. I think that this also might look at a bit around what we are doing with insecurity too, has its linkage to some of these things, right? So I think that the more we're able to invest in these infrastructures, the more we're able to open up, for example, things like connectivity with telecoms and technology, right? I think that our broadband connectivity, we can expand it so that we can facilitate more access to internet and the digital economy. I think that our mobile network infrastructure in itself, right, that we can improve on it. With this investment, we can also tackle issues around insecurity by using data and intelligence, right, to be able to track down some of these activities. And I think one more thing I just want to add around infrastructure will be housing, right? I think that we still need to solve the housing problem, right? There's empirical data that tells us that there's still a deficit around housing, right? So we need to do a lot of work, and that might speak to things around regional and urban planning, right? To be able to find, opportunities. I know a lot is going on. For example, if I take the FCT now, in terms of opening up of some of the areas now for urban growth and also dealing with the housing issues. I think that collectively, all these things will help us address our infrastructure deficit. But like you said, energy transition is something that has come to stay, and I think that's the only sustainable way to really deal with issues around power going forward.
Well said, Jonathan Ikeolumba. And over to you now, Dr. Audu. In 2 minutes, we want for you to speak regarding, infrastructural development also, specifically at the business environment here in Nigeria. Unfortunately, like you rightly mentioned, there has been a mass exodus of multinationals outside of Nigeria. And Nigeria is ranked poorly, in the ease of doing business index in the past years. But what specific areas would you, recommend that action is taken and taken immediately?
Well, infrastructure is very important, and we need to invest in our road network and our rail transportation. Now, rail in most countries is the cheapest and fastest means of transportation. Now, if you want to tap into other sectors of the economy, like solid minerals, for example, you cannot rely on roads. We have a lot of iron ore, marble in my state, for example, Kogi State, but you cannot tap that. Tap into it because you need an efficient train system to move it from the point of extraction to the port of consumption or distribution. And without a rail network, you can't do it. So you find out that a lot of these solid minerals we have are untapped. And what you have is the Chinese or different people come and, connive with local chiefs and then extract our minerals. So it's very important that one of the most important infrastructure that we need to get working in Nigeria is our rail network. We need to invest heavily in it because that will bring down the cost of a lot of things. Cost of transportation, cost of food, because moving goods from one point of production, the north to the south, involves a lot of transportation costs. So if we invest in rail infrastructure, that will go a long way to reducing cost of doing business. Power is another example. We need to invest in power. Now, if businesses have to use diesel to run their business, that is also going to translate into increased cost of doing business. That is why you talk about the ease of doing business. People rather go and invest in economics with stable power than going to invest in economics with caricature power system. So what is our target? We need to target, if we should be targeting maybe 10,000 to 20,000 megawatts of power in order to sustain the business environment in Nigeria. A lot of businesses, we heard the president said that 30 billion foreign direct investment has come. Yeah, that is good, but we need to work, we need to encourage more to come and stay, because if the cost of doing business is very high here, what happens is that they go to neighboring countries like Ghana. I've had people that want to invest in agriculture move to Ghana because of the epileptic power supply and security.
In Nigeria.
So these are critical areas. Our transportation system, rail, road, we have to invest heavily in it, and power system. That will reduce the cost of doing business. That would encourage more companies to come and invest, and even production. We're talking about, we have helium, Tesla should come and start business here, but what is the cost of doing business if Tesla is to set up a factory here?
Unfortunately, our time is fast spent, but that's all that we will be taking on today's edition of Business Daily. A lot to unpack. We could have gone on and on and on, but unfortunately, like I said before, our time is fast spent. I'll just say a big thank you to our guests on today's edition of the program, Jonathan Ikeolumba and Dr. Aliyu Audu. Thank you for all the insights that you have shared today. But do stay tuned. At the top of the hour, the discourse continues on Nigeria at 64. My name is Chiamaka and Nendu. Thank you for watching.